special good evening to you and welcome to Mr. Chairman, wherever you are in St. Lucia and in the diaspora. Many friends have been contacting me of late, especially in Canada and the United States of America. I just want to say thank you very much and keep your texts and emails and what have you coming. Very much appreciated. Wherever you are in St. Lucia, from Grosley in the north to VA4 in the south, those of you on the eastern coastline, our friends in Dennery and Monrepo and Miku and Deriso, and right through to our friends Ancillary, Canaries, Sufresh, Wazelle, not forgetting our very good friends in Marigot and that area there. Thank you very much for tuning in. Welcome to our meeting. On this week's program, Mr. Chairman, we focus on the announcement by Prime Minister Alan Chasney during his budget address that RSL, the nation station, is to be closed. Radio St. Lucia came out of the Windward Islands Broadcasting Service, WIBS, at the turn of the 1970s, and in the last couple of decades has not been able to compete in what can be described as an extremely hostile advertising environment, with some 20 radio stations in the marketplace. Additionally, RSL is in debt of over $3 million. To discuss this extremely controversial issue and how perhaps it may be solved, perhaps the government will listen to what we have to say tonight, we have with us Mr. Jerry George, General Manager, Radio St. Lucia, 1997 to 2000, and Ms. Barbara Jacobs Small, a former Programs Director. We also look forward to your thoughts and opinions on this matter. Welcome to Mr. Chairman. Thanks once again for tuning in, and thank you very much,
thank you,
both of you, for being here.
Thank you.
This is really quite interesting times. Interesting times. So much drama. I was telling Barbara before you came, Jerry, that I had thought that a general election would have essentially put everything to rest, and we would have just seen peace and tranquility and quiet and so on. No one minds a little dissension here and there, but it's looking like it's a campaign all over again, Any thoughts?
No, I think it's good for a democracy to have that, because I think a lot of people believe that once they have finished with the ballot boxes and cast their vote, that's the end of their part of the democracy. But agitation wherever it is needed, and dissent sometimes, is part of that democracy. And so, especially when we have a prime minister who I would say is given to dramatics, as you indicated, it riles people up in certain ways, and especially if answers are not forthcoming, as we have seen, especially with certain projects. But I am not fearful about it at all. I don't think it's another election. I just think it's a continuation of my vote being cast at the ballot. I speak for myself.
Agitation. Are you surprised, Barbara, that there's all of this?
No, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, Steve, because I think if you look globally, you will realize that is generally a trend. They talk about the rise of the populist movement and all of that. I have to say that I'm with Jerry. I agree. I think these things are good for democracy. I think in many respects, we as a society, we have become very lazy in terms of our participation in the political process, because we have framed the political process as something that surrounds elections, and we do not realize that for you to be a citizen, you are political, and being political does not necessarily mean being partisan, because you have a stake in the civic life of the country, and so that means you have to air your opinions, you have to weigh in on things, you have to say what you expect, and you have to show within reason and within the law when you're not happy, if you're not getting what you expect, and you have to be willing to and to allow sort of discussion to perpetuate. We have to do that. And so I think maybe the one thing that concerns me is that we are still very much immature as an electorate, and that immaturity has really been fueled by, I think, politicians, that we have not been empowered to have faith and confidence in good constructive discourse.
I endorse that 100%. Discourse is definitely lacking in this country. Both political organizations and perhaps the independent organizations as well, they tend to, things are just generally partisan. I really, and that brings in RSL, and I always saw RSL in that light as being a medium where that encouraged discourse. And maybe one of the issues that we can discuss is that both political parties, when they were in government at one time or the other, it is generally felt that they abused Radio St. Lucia in very, very many ways. And I want to find out what you think about the budget address by the Prime Minister, where he finally, well, it's a fact now, that's what it appears to be, that the impending closure of Radio St. Lucia. Just your thoughts very quickly. And then we can delve into the role of RSL, what role it has fulfilled over the years, and take it from there.
Barbara?
David concerns me. It disturbs me. To a certain extent, I can understand the burden that Radio St. Lucia has presented for successive administrations. I would not say entirely that all the fault lies with the political administration itself, because and earlier on you alluded to the fact that there has always been that kind of political interference in the operations of Radio St. Lucia.
As far back as the 70s.
Yes. And so at different periods in time, how that political interference has impacted the operations of Radio St. Lucia is in terms of, hiring, in terms of constraining, the operations of the radio station, how it must function, what it must say, who must have access, that kind of way. And so what you find is over time you really you negatively impact the ability of the radio station to vision properly in the context of not just the market, but in the context of what it means to be a public broadcaster that has to really uphold that sort of national psyche and celebrate that national psyche and give voice to all sections of society, so that has impacted the development of the radio station. And so if the radio station cannot communicate, it cannot demarcate its differentiation in a powerful way, then it's very, very easy for it to get sidelined and for it to slip down, in terms of how people value it and how they see its importance. But I think that political interference has in great part impacted that ability of the radio station to do development work.
Well, I will say, earlier when Barbara spoke, she had said that worldwide it's a trend as to what's happening in terms of, citizens and rising up in terms of gaining their rightful place in terms of democracy, but also in broadcasting. This trend of, governments not seeing the worth of public service broadcasters, especially now, is something that is happening all over the world. You look at Britain, for example, you look at the United States, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, you look at, NOS in the Netherlands. All these entities, public service broadcasters, have come under heavy fire by governments. And I think one of the unfortunate things for us here in St. Lucia is that we never had a conversation as to what is the true role of Radio St. Lucia. It has always been seen, yes, as a nation station, but that translated to a mouthpiece of the ruling party. And because of this, it has always been regarded as a bastard child of the administration. So we want to use Radio St. Lucia for more ads and for government information. That's fine, but to the nitty gritty crux of discussing, as Barbara said, the psyche. Because when you look at the history of public broadcasting, which goes back to 1938 in the United States with the formation of the Federal Communications Committee, the
FCC.
the FCC. That is what was in mind. They saw it as, at that time too, from 1932 up to 39, there was a growing interest in commercial broadcasting. And so, the president at the time said, we need another voice, an alternative voice, a voice that is going to be protected from the vagaries of ownership, of the marketplace, and of political interference. That is what it was. And it was then called, if you want, educational broadcasting. And so we look at the BBC, and it's the same type of focus that had been, been given to what the BBC's purpose was. Of course, things have changed, and I'm sure that we can talk about it a little later. But the fact is that we have never had a conversation, a national conversation about it as in the other countries. Because if you look at, for example, the BBC, there have been several white papers and green papers where there have been national consultations and discussions about the BBC. And as many of us know, it has become the prototype, if you wish, not only of excellent broadcasting around the world, at least one of them, but also as the force to look up to when we talk about good journalism and good programming and excellent in standards. And so since we have never had that conversation, we have just continued to just use Radio St. Lucia, whichever administration to its advantage. And usually what happens is the staff and the St. Lucian public suffers. And so this closure is quite daunting. Yes, and it's quite, I believe, inappropriate at this time. It is something that needs to be given much thought to in terms of discussing what is Radio St. Lucia to do. And we can say, well, pump more money into it. I don't think that is ever going to come. But the history will tell us that that was one of the, you call it a burden. Yeah, and it was supposed to be a benefit, and it was the Prime Minister John Compton at the time, in 1975, with the formation of the St. Lucia Broadcasting Corporation, first Chairman Winville King, and one of the things that he did was, I'm talking about John Compton, is put the noose around Radio St. Lucia's neck by saying the money that we had borrowed to build the studios at the Morn, $600,000. That's your business to get rid of it and to make the station function. Now remember, Radio St. Lucia at the time had no idea about commercial broadcasting because it was coming out of the Windward Islands Broadcasting Service, which as we know is a public service broadcaster. So it was an unfair move, but politicians do that.
Don't both of you think that in very many ways, Radio St. Lucia and the former managers there did not really failed in understanding the marketplace? One of the things I remember on a couple of occasions when I was there, and I did a couple of stints, I always discussed with the manager in this kind of environment, like the VOB model or the CBC model, that you have like RSL, the Radio St. Lucia, the parent, the mother station would be what is right now, and then you have an offshoot of one or two FM networks, one targeting young people, which would then compete favorably with some of the yuppie models that we listen to from time to time. And then you have possibly a network playing oldie goldie programming and talk, perhaps talk programs, and that Radio St. Lucia, having been around for 40 plus years, felt that it had arrived, it rested on its laurels, and then the managers did not have the required vision to take Radio St. Lucia in a different direction?
Well, Dave, I think it goes back to the question that Jerry is putting on the table about what is the role of the radio station, of the public broadcaster. Now, when that is clearly defined, as an organization, everything you do has to be informed by that mandate. Who you hire, how you hire, what your programming is about has to be responding to what that mandate says it is doing. So I think, we have to look at that as one of the issues as well. Radio Solution has had some very good managers, I think. Not all of them. But I think it's that same, that, the lack of investment in sort of the lack of investment in educating, in hiring people who are educated in broadcasting, that kind of way. And by extension, people who have perhaps a track record in business and, that kind of way. But it's separate and apart from that. I think one of the problems has been that, in the wake of liberalization, we hear about liberalization, we hear that we are our country's party to all sorts of international agreements and protocols, and then we have to be doing things the way of the world. And so we just open the market. The media market is ridiculously fragmented in St. Lucia. Now, that is not the fault of any management team of Radio St. Lucia. I think that is the fault of the powers that be of the day, when that whole ethos was hitting the world. How do we take these types of trends that are happening and we sort of remodel them to our reality? And that is what I find that we consistently fail to do as small islands. We just take things lock, stock, and barrel, and we do not see how they apply. We need to sort of frame these things to accommodate our own reality. So for a small market, 238 square miles, we have how many businesses registered on the books in St. Lucia? Barely 3,000, if that many. How can we have 20 radio stations operating? That is madness. It's ludicrous. So where you have, for instance, a Radio St. Lucia that has been there for a long time, which perhaps, can be pushed to sort of revision, in the context of, the development agenda of St. Lucia, revision in terms of the trends in broadcasting and media, revision in the context of information technology and digital technology and what that means for the media product. How can it do that in a marketplace that has opened itself to everybody, all and sundry, who don't necessarily have a long-range view for where they themselves are going? So I have been concerned for a very long time about that fragmentation that has been allowed to just multiply and multiply and multiply, and businesses are supposed to remain viable in that. And I think that's ridiculous. I think it's one thing to talk about, that's the market, that's the marketplace, these are trends in the marketplace. But I think at the end of the day, and maybe I think I'm a socialist at heart, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the space you have, how much business can you really do in a particular sector. You have to crunch the numbers, and then you have to cap. And that, I think, is a serious consideration.
One of the things that concerns me, Jerry, you wanted to say anything to what she?
Well, I have a lot to say, but go ahead with the question.
What worries me, and one of the things I'd like to do is to give our viewers a bit of history about how Radio St. Lucia evolved, and Jerry, to a certain extent, has alluded to it. There was the Windward Islands Broadcasting Service, headquartered in Grenada, St. George's, Grenada, and you had substations in the other islands. If my memory serves me right, the news from St. George's, Grenada was live at 12:30 every day, 6 days a week. Monday to Saturday. The news from Kingstown, St. Vincent was at 12:45. The news from Castries, St. Lucia was at 1 o'clock, to be followed by the news from Roseau Dominica at 1:15. So you had WIBS, Windward Islands Broadcasting Service, based in Grenada, the main station, the mother station, based in Grenada, with substations in the islands, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and of course, Dominica. I worked for WIBS as a freelancer. In fact, that's how I entered the broadcasting career, under the tutorship of Winston Hinkson and Margaret Robert Steele. And those two are really responsible for my broadcasting career. Although I would not say that broadcasting really made me into what I am today. I think I bear that. I think the tourism sector, I think I owe that more to than anything else. But it was a start, and that's where the confidence and the ability to speak somewhat properly, that's how it started. My years, WIBS became Radio St. Lucia, like I said, and I was employed there for about 4 or 5 years. I had people like Winston Springer and Jeff Fade, Lucella Blanchard. I think, Jerry, at some point you came while I was there.
Yes,
down
yes,
in
that's
the,
right.
and we were based, you know where the House of Assembly is? We were based in a little cubby hole. You go past up the steps and then you turn right and into the little corner there. That is where we were. And they were fascinating years. The number of wonderful programs we did. And we featured on being, you had to be the total broadcaster. It was not about being a DJ or being a newscaster or being just an announcer. It had to encompass the broadcaster, the total broadcaster. You had to be involved in doing everything a broadcaster does. And I just want to place on record my thanks. I don't know if she's watching, but Margaret Robert Steele and of course Winston Hinkson for helping me along. What's your story? I know there's a fascinating story.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that I was hired by Hunter G. Francois.
Oh boy!
That's
with
my
his black boy.
And I think that is the beginning of the affirmation. That that helped me along and helped me to feel valid. In the sector, that Hunter J. Francois saw something in me. But yeah, my story was that I was a student at St. Joseph's Convent, and I think there was once a program, I think in the 70s, called Tomorrow's Children, right, that Lucella Blanchard and people like that were responsible for producing. Yes. And it was very popular in its day, but apparently people may have moved on. And I think Radio St. Lucia at the time was trying to find, innovating to create a replacement for it. And they had approached some of the secondary schools to put forward some of their good speakers, students who spoke well or who had an interest in broadcasting or engineering or electronics so I was one of those that was selected from St. Joseph's Convent. Along with people like Taj Weeks, from St. Mary's College, and a young man called George Murray.
So Taj was actually on radio as well?
Yes, Taj, myself, George Murray, Eugene Lubin. I think Jacqueline Emmanuel may have been one of the people from Radio St. Lucia, but I don't remember if she stayed from St. Joseph's Convent. But I don't recall her being around for very long. But so we were, sort of part of, we had started this program on Radio St. Lucia called Rise, and we were mentored by people like Margaret Robert Steele and Jerry, and it was exciting. It was really exciting. But so they had used Form 4 students, because Form 5, arguably they would have been doing exams. And so when we moved into Form 5, I think maybe I don't know if I graduated out of it or if the program had died for a while or something like that. And then I had left school and I needed a job and I didn't have enough subjects to go to A level.
So it was your first job?
Yes.
RSL?
Yes.
Was your first job?
It was my first job. And so I was trying to get a job for a very long time and I couldn't get a job. And I sent an application to RSL, not really expecting a response or acknowledgement. And I got a call because Hunter Francois and Jerry George had remembered me, the girl with the voice.
Yeah, well, I'm not coming from Radio St. Lucia. I started with Radio Caribbean first.
Really?
That's correct.
I can't remember that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I started with David Gardner at the time. And then 1 year later...
But you know, I did a stint with them, eh?
Yes, of course, yeah.
And I'm not so sure how I ended there. I'm trying to remember now. I know I did maybe a year or two. Because D-Day in Vieux-Fort,
Okay,
I
yes,
remember
right.
I was
Yes.
at RCI. When was D-Day? In 71?
Early
72?
70s, yeah. Early 70s. Yeah.
And then I moved back. Winston wanted me. Oh, you see, I was doing freelance. It was WIBS. And when they changed to Radio St. Lucia, I think during WIBS, I got a job with RCI. And I spent 2 years at RCI. And when Radio St. Lucia when WIBS morphed into Radio St. Lucia, I then went back to Radio St. Lucia. I went over to Radio St. Lucia. That's how
So
it
I'm
happened.
coming from RCI, and was hired in the newsroom with Ernie Sion as the news editor. Of course, Margaret Robert Steele was there, and also Winston Hinkson. Lucella Blanchard too. And I remember Barbara Jacobs at the time, very,
Feisty.
energetic, and always with a book in her hand. And I remember the day we sat in Hunter's office and decided on Barbara's fate. Should she or should she not be there? So that was it, because I was program. It was manager yet. They had another WIBS name for it, production assistant or programs, something. And I think that I was responsible for getting Barbara into the field, or understanding what was being done as far as Radio St. Lucia was concerned. And I stayed there for about 12 years before I left to go to the BBC on training, and then when I returned, went to the University of the West Indies, and then the United States.
Mascom in Jamaica.
Yes, right, yes. So I think that a lot of people may say that Radio St. Lucia had been stuffy and, it's no longer good for young people, but it was the medium that provided opportunities for all St. Lucians, both in terms of, getting careers and also for the types of programs. So Radio St. Lucia was responsible for youth programs, and we had drama, we had readings, we had choral programs, and the range of music programs from jazz to classical to current.
That's another thing.
That is the whole.
You learn to your musical appreciation.
Yeah, you're
really
right. But the bigger
grew.
picture was that it took care of the interests of the nation.
Yeah.
And it assisted, as all public service broadcasters should do, in terms of determining a public identity, a St. Lucian identity. And that's what all stations around the world
Which
do.
is lacking in St. Lucia right now.
You
really
go
have
listening to CBC in Canada, and there's a great stress of what it is to be Canadian. And in the public service broadcasting in the United States, Italy, wherever you go, it has always been that the national broadcaster is supposed to be assisting
in identifying,
in helping St. Lucian Kopan Konu.
Yes,
that is what it is.
Understand yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is what it is. That is what it is. And so that's why when you hear about a closure, you just see at the back of your mind, just losing ground.
Yes.
Losing ground, and that is most unfortunate. But what I was surprised about is that when the National Trust, for example, had gotten into the bad books of the Prime Minister, the first thing he said is, give us a plan. So I'm surprised now there wasn't a give us a plan.
Yeah.
for Radio St. Lucia, so that at least we can see what options. But, in public service broadcasting, it's an opportunity to be creative. And Radio St. Lucia has to be looked at today in the whole context of what it means to be in the environment of creative industries. It cannot be just, journalism, and it has to be part of a bigger picture than just, Radio St. Lucia being on the air. And Dave, I know people like to say that it is competition. Radio St. Lucia, at least the mission originally, was never to compete.
Yeah.
Right?
Precisely.
It was to enhance.
Yes,
right?
precisely.
Wherever commercial broadcasters failed, commercial radio usually depends on quality rather than quantity in most instances. And there is a sameness about commercial radio because we go after the popular and what is regarded as the if you want to call it the common denominator. Yes, just basically satisfying the entertainment need of most persons. So it's not about competing. And once you throw Radio St. Lucia into that mix, and especially after it was done so very earlier on, Radio St. Lucia was always lagging behind, pulling that heavy piece of concrete that was put at its neck, from day one of its existence. And from that, it has never ever recovered. And added to this, Radio St. Lucia would have been, let's say, 75, so it would have been like 42 years.
Mm-hmm.
42 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we have not had too much change in the broadcasting legislation, for example, that governs Radio St. Lucia, except for around 2000 when the St. Lucia Broadcasting Corporation
became
a Radio St. Lucia
Company
Limited. But what has happened in the wider world? We've had all sorts of various technologies competing, and one of the things I always say is if we look at the IT language, it's like trying to operate Apple on Windows. It just will not work. Yes. And that is the unfortunate thing about it. And politicians have always seen it, as I said, not in terms of value, but in terms of, getting what I want and pamele for the rest of us.
I think there's this. You see, the 5-year cycle. I think it's a stranglehold on development, on our growth as a democracy. And I just wanted to say that because I think politicians think in 5-year cycles, but you cannot achieve anything sustainable in 5 years. And so very often you throw out the baby with the bathwater in the process because there's a particular agenda you have and you have to meet it by this particular time. So a lot of things fall by the wayside.
Radio St. Lucia was or is looked upon by a lot of entities in St. Lucia as, those entities consider Radio St. Lucia something very, very special. Radio St. Lucia promotes indigenous culture, the Laos, the La Marguerite, Folk Research Center, the Cultural Development Foundation, all those entities, and even the St. Lucia Tourist Board, the Chamber of Commerce, all of those entities are sort of in the same sort of cycles, with RSL. They're national systems, national institutions. And on the way here, I was wondering, wow, where are the Laos people going to go on a Saturday morning in the future? Radio St. Lucia was expected to promote Laos music, La Marguerite music, other indigenous forms of music, the sporting culture, local clubs and what have you. And I'm just left to wonder, whether enough thought has been given to all of that, the little intricacies, little things that perhaps the cabinet of ministers have not even thought out.
Well, Dave, from what I understand, as you know, there was a special committee to look into the salvation or the salvaging of Radio St. Lucia. And from my understanding, it was led by Levy Hirel,
As a matter of fact,
who was the chair of that committee, and I think they spent a good few months, sort of researching, if you wish, what should happen, and I understand that options were given. I'm not too sure if a closure, but I do understand that a presentation is being made to cabinet pretty soon by the chair as far as that is concerned. So I'm not too sure if this is an option on the the number of avenues available to Radio St. Lucia moving forward, or if this was just in keeping with the trend by the Prime Minister to sort of close anything that doesn't seem to be making money immediately or to save money. And to talk about money, I think I had told you that when you look at the $400,000, which is the subvention for Radio St. Lucia, this is only 0.03% of the national budget, of our budget of $1.2 million. Yes. And if we were to take a population of 175,000 people in St. Lucia and you divided that by $400,000, then it means that every St. Lucian living today is paying $2.30 a year.
That is what it's costing this.
That's right, yes. So perhaps we need to look at other options as it relates to licenses, as they do in Britain, in terms of maybe hiking up that price until Radio St. Lucia can get hiking up that cost to the St. Lucian public of $2.30, maybe a little higher. And I just did some calculations. If, let's say, we were to increase it by $5, there would be available, or government would be required to do 875, will be subventing Radio St. Lucia $875,000. And if we say $10 a year, then that will take us to $1.3 million. The problem or the challenge might be, how do you collect money? Like, for example, as you know, every television set that is purchased in the UK, and any television set that is owned by persons in the UK, there is a requirement that you pay a license fee. Right. Now, this has been going on for generations, and people almost come to expect it. I don't know how we're going to sort of fit it in to get the amount of money needed, but this will give Radio St. Lucia more breathing space to sort of service the debt, right? And also to maybe be a little more into, or do some things in keeping with what we think Radio St. Lucia should be doing. But definitely it should not be competing as it presently is, because it was never intended for it to be competing with a commercial radio station.
Yeah. Let's take a first break. You are viewing Mr. Chairman. I'm David Samuels, and I'm here with Mr. Jerry George, a former general manager of Radio St. Lucia, 1997 to 2000, and Ms. Barbara Jacobs Small. Were you that same period? Program director?
Yes, Barbara came around. You were program
around
director.
1981.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
But when I returned, you were program director, right? Yes.
That would have been maybe the late 80s.
And you were for what period of time?
Until about 1991.
Okay, so
Yeah.
about 3-4 years.
And I left
right?
Radio St. Lucia because of the same political interference.
The same interference.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Let's take our first break. We'll be back in a short while.
Taste the real Ruta, enjoy the real Ruta, refreshing juice of every day. Whoa, Ruta.
The Ministry of Health will be undertaking an island-wide survey from April 24th to verify and document St. Lucia's success in eliminating schistosomiasis, otherwise known as bilharzia, a chronic disease caused by parasitic worms which live in certain freshwater snails. This survey targets primary school students within the age group of 8 to 11 years. It is very simple. The survey will obtain a urine sample from students, a few drops of blood through a finger prick, and administering a short questionnaire. All tests will be undertaken by a trained team from the Ministry of Health under the supervision of a registered nurse. Now remember, this is only a survey. St. Lucia currently has no issues with schistosomiasis or bilharzia. However, we need the support of communities, teachers, parents, and their students. Partner with the Ministry of Health and support the survey from April 24th and help protect the health of this generation and future generations. A message brought to you by the Ministry of Health in partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Pan American Health Organization.
Are you getting the broadband speed that you're paying for? Based on your contract as advertised, several factors may affect broadband speed, like distance from the provider's exchange to your property, the type of line to your house, or processing power of the hardware or device that you are using. To check your speed, you can use a broadband speed checker on the World Wide Web. If it's less than the advertised speed, you may be within your rights to complain to your provider. Always read your contract carefully.
This message is brought to you as a public service announcement by Actel, the NTRC, and this station.
Hello there, welcome back. I'm David Samuels. In a few moments, we'll be opening the lines to give you the opportunity to air your views on the impending closure of Radio St. Lucia as announced by Prime Minister Alan Chasney in his budget address about a couple of weeks ago. You may have some thoughts on this very controversial matter, and we certainly look forward to hearing from you. The telephone numbers on the screen, 451-9349, 453-1730. And we are streaming live at www.stluciafirst.com. And I do understand quite a few friends in the in Canada, Toronto in particular, as well as the tri-state in the United States. They do watch us quite a lot, so we want to thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you. Models. What would, if you had an opportunity to get the attention of the Prime Minister, what would you advise him to do against the backdrop of the announcement that he has already made?
And that question is leveled at who, Barbara?
At you, yeah.
Okay, Dave, I would tell the Prime Minister that I have great respect for the fact that there's a $3 million debt. It's a very serious concern. We know the state of the economy is not only in St. Lucia, the state of the global economy, and we know that we really have to find ways for us to manage our, manage government a little better. But having said that, I think consultation is critical. I think you don't just consult with a few handpicked people based on what outcome you want to get out of it. I think you really need to, and they call that development communication. You engage all the stakeholders who will be impacted by this activity. I was never approached to participate in any discussion, any conversation, and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination some great intellectual or somebody who has a vast amount of knowledge on the subject, but I'm saying that I'm a stakeholder, and I'm not an ignorant one. And so there are a lot of people who have been in the sector for a long time. There are a lot of visionaries in this country. I think there's a great resource to be had, even at the OECS Commission, in terms of looking at how we go about this at the level of the OECS. There's still a struggle to get the idea of integration to really sink into people's psyche, to start to think of themselves as Eastern Caribbean people. So there's a process that is involved in achieving that, in sort of building identity and sort of affirming that identity. So you have to bring all these thinkers together around a table because they understand that type of problem. And you might be surprised to find out the kind of ideas that can come forward. I think we must never lose sight of the fact that we are a small island state. we have a development agenda, and we have to find ways that work for us. Yes, there are certain trends that are happening in the world, and we have to go with them, generally speaking, but we have to model them to accommodate where we are. I'm in the market. I do public relations. I do marketing. I work for government agencies. I work for the private sector. I work for a lot of NGOs, locally and internationally. And Dave, I see a lot of gaps that exist that are not being filled. For instance, okay, I sit on the board of Cultural Development Foundation. I'm a cultural enthusiast. I have been associated with Folk Research Center. I have done work for Ministry of Sustainable Development. And I see all these sets of people are scrambling to look for a mechanism through which they can do their publicity, their public education, that kind of way. And I'm thinking that you have a public broadcaster that really and truly should be co-owned by all these entities.
Precisely.
Why should, for instance, a Cultural Development Foundation be struggling to raise money for its programs and raise money for its public education, raise money to be able to document heritage and history and things like that as it unfolds, and to be able to pay to broadcast it? And we can say, well, yes, there's a national television network, but that is fine. I mean, I do see that there is a very good fit between seeing how you can streamline the operations of a Radio St. Lucia with a national television network, not necessarily a GIS. GIS is a propaganda machine. But it's for the government itself to understand what the national television network must be doing, how that correlates with Radio St. Lucia, where the nexus resides, and how to sort of make it work, how to sort of streamline and make these things work. Because there's a lot more life in a Radio St. Lucia, and that life, the justification for that life is our very own development agenda. We're talking about sustainable development. We're talking about the ICT, digital technology, and how that is accommodating the language of business all over the world. You understand what I'm saying? And if we bring all these, and like a St. Lucia Tourist Board has been struggling for the last 10 years to mount a public education campaign to help St. Lucians understand how tourism works.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
It is crazy.
So some of these agencies themselves are resourced. Some of them have a greater international networks that they can tap into, that if they all co-own or they have some sort of stake in a public broadcaster, where they may not necessarily be able to bring in money, they may be able to foster connections. You understand what I'm saying? You know, so I find that kind of thinking is not happening in the country. I think we try to go after 10,000 little bushfires, and we're not looking at one big framework that can work and everybody can, you know, win. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm a Jacobs. I talk a lot.
I think Barbara frames it very wonderfully. You know, the thing is that, as I said, Radio St. Lucia has not been given the opportunity to grow, you know, or to look at other options apart from being a mouthpiece for the administration that's in power at the time. And so this has sort of stunted its growth indirectly. And, you know, government, or the past government, and especially this one, because closure is on their lips, must look at what must be done. I mean, the St. Lucia, we don't even have, for example, a Broadcasting Act, which has been banded around for almost a decade.
That's true.
You know, and we have not sat down to have any discussion. So how serious are we about, you know, a national broadcaster such as this? Now, let's look, for example, you're talking about models. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at what's happening in some of the countries and say, you know, can this be looked at? Okay, since we are going on the commercial model, and the mother of all commercial models is the United States. Of course, as you know, 4,000 commercial radio stations and one public service broadcaster called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The government provides almost $250 million a year for that broadcaster. In France, for example, the government has become partners with commercial stations. They have interest in the commercial stations and have built, you know, commercial public private partnerships. So the thing is, if we are going down a commercial line, then we have to say, well, should we allow government to get free time? Because government is really, stifling competition because they want their programs to be ad free. And the thing is, you are paying for a license when you start a commercial station, and then are turning around and ask me, to be benevolent by giving you free airtime. It does not work. So we need to sort of come together, as Barbara says, stakeholders. So when August 30th comes and the community, let's say in Bellevue, Vieux-Fort, is looking for it's Lao's coverage to hear how their community is doing when they have come to Castries. Where did they go for it? Facebook, you say?
And
No.
they're entitled to want that.
Yeah, exactly.
They are a section of this
And they're
this
used to
discussion.
getting it.
Yeah.
What do you tell those people in the future?
But it's not.
They're used to
It's not
getting
even
it.
only that they're used to getting it, Dave. They are a section of this community that we call St. Lucia.
Right.
They are entitled to
They're
their
entitled
time.
to their
They're
time.
entitled to their celebrations.
Yeah.
These celebrations have really defined their communities for generations and generations. So it is as valid as carnival. It is as valid as jazz. And so that is the mentality you need in your government.
Yeah.
Our artists are crying out for an avenue to sort of expose their work. Everybody is trying to do it on his or her own. Now with a commercial, with a station like Radio St. Lucia completely off the air, there is absolutely nowhere else that will happen. And so you can well understand
And
what is going to, if it's done to maybe seasoned artists, could you imagine how devastating it might be for younger persons who are seeking, an avenue to get their works done? But talking, Dave, I don't want to cut you, but we must compare. We must look at the models, and people keep saying, for example, look at local music. And we look at the Canadian model, the CBC model, for example, where the government at one time did say that there was, it was going to mandate a certain amount of airtime because of the invading North American culture that was, coming through loud and clear in Canada. But people are only looking just at the radio station. It was an entire, what does it mean to have a station that is going to do things Canadian? So that also focused on providing opportunities for film or providing opportunities for the classical orchestra, for the discovery of the Inuit culture in the far-flung reaches of Canada. All these things was brought into play because there was a plan and there was a mission. There was a vision as to what. But if you limit that vision, or if you just curtail that vision to just, let's make $45,000 a year, then it doesn't make any sense. Definitely some people who are the fabric of our cultural heritage, the fabric of what it is to be St. Lucian, then that is going to be fastly disappearing within the 5 years of this administration.
Dave, another element, if you'll permit me, that I do not want us to forget, because I'm 53 and so I have some Alzheimer's. I remember some things sometimes, so I lose it. So another thing that concerns me is, how can this model also accommodate the method of training, the perpetuation of training in media and broadcasting? Because we heard a lament all the time. Now the sound on radio is really banal. It's crass. There are no standards anymore. Barbara, you must go back on the radio. Will you pay my mortgage? So and I've always wondered what would happen if we had created a teaching component with the public broadcaster. And that's one of the things that people like Jerry used to experiment with. I mean, people like myself and Timothy Polio and Arturo Valentino in Barbados, all these people are students of Jerry George, because he always taught. you know, he ran the teaching component of the broadcasting for the sort of sustainability and for the standards, even as, you know, he saw to the program, operations at Radio St. Lucia. But, you know, what is to say that we cannot create some sort of partnership with learning institutions? You know, secondary schools, they have the environmental clubs. What about the media club? You know, that you can create a little channel off of Radio St. Lucia that is their channel. And then they have their, you know, who has an hour and who has an hour. What is to say that we cannot create some sort of partnership with University of the West Indies to create some sort of off-site, you know, component to like a Carrie Lake? That you can come and do summer, you know, internships, that kind of way. What is to say that we cannot do these things? Because it's these types of hybrids that will be able to kill a few stones with a few birds with one stone. But, you know, we have to look at what is the media product going forward and what are we going to do about it.
You know, while you were speaking, Jerry, I was thinking about music. That decision, I suspect, has more to do with information. Perhaps trying. I don't think music is an area that much thought has been given to. You hit the nail on the head when you said something to the effect that a lot of the Lawas and Margaret groups and the St. Lucian artists have relied on Radio St. Lucia for generations to be. Look at the Calypso season. Which radio station in St. Lucia played Calypso music as often as Radio St. Lucia did? Radio St. Lucia was regarded as a champion of the musician, of the Calypsonian, of the local artists and so on. And I don't think that aspect of it was given much thought.
And that is because of our mandate, you know, because I've never ever worked anywhere else. I think I must be one of the few media people in St. Lucia who never worked at any other media house but one. But, you know, not to cut you short and hold your train of thought, Dave, because of the mandate of Radio St. Lucia, successive program managers have always paid serious attention to the allocation of a percentage of the airtime for the day to local music.
Right.
And I have to say that they have continued to do better and do better. And in recent times, Radio St. Lucia has an entire Thursday that's dedicated,
which is a very good idea.
Yeah.
And you know something, when the local artists have been complaining that most of the radio stations in St. Lucia anyway played North American and Jamaican music
because the royalties are tied to how much they get.
So a Radio St. Lucia is so integral, you know, so very important to the development of the arts and music in St. Lucia.
And you see, I don't think people are behind the scenes and they don't really understand all the considerations that go into the operation of the public broadcaster. You know, so yeah, that point is very valid. In my day, I think what we had done was we played 2 local songs at intervals, like every 5 after the hour we played it. But so as local music proliferated, you know, as we increased the amount of time that's allocated in the broadcast day,
there is a plan afoot, and this is the thinking I'm getting when I speak to some members of the government. There's a thinking that because of the broadcast climate as we see it today, that a lot, because of the competition and people now have so many choices, why can't we provide information, news on whatever needs, whatever the public needs to, whatever news needs to be disseminated to the public? Why don't we use all the radio stations or most of the radio stations in St. Lucia to get that information out, rather than one entity which the government feels people are not listening to very much anyway? How do you view that? The idea that, we have a way of getting the information out, and the whole idea is to produce programs in whatever form and send it to the relevant media houses in St.
There's a
Lucia.
narrow view of the radio station as a commodity.
And I think most times, Dave, we are lulled and we are seduced by new technologies and believe that, you know, it's working marvelously in some of the parts of the world, so it has to be work, as, just as wonderfully as it does elsewhere, it will work in St. Lucia. But the thing is, Dave, we have to look at how these technologies impact, on operations, let's say, of the radio station. I'm all for expand, and as I said, perhaps the starting point, Dave, is for at least this administration to sort of look itself in the mirror and say, we had a hand in getting Radio St. Lucia to where it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that will be the
Yes,
challenge.
yes. We had a hand because of our past, involvement in the station. And, having sat in the manager's chair, I could tell you, Dave, it is a sort of combination of being a tightrope artist and a magician, as well as being a guru at management. And I think that, yes, we can say that the government provided the subvention, but really what kept the station going, I think, for managers across the board is the staff. It has always been the staff. It's not, and I'm sure, if perhaps Radio St. Lucia had not been abused, if you were to tell the staff, well, we need to go, and do something for the people of St. Lucia, I think people would rise to the occasion for this. But, the thing is that I think if government decides now to say, we had a hand and let us see how we can put it right, instead of closure, because closing it is not going to get us anywhere, and subsequently a generation would have suffered immensely as a result of the closure, and we might well be having to start all over again. And as I said, the models are there. We can look at Jamaica, we can look at Trinidad, well, not necessarily, but we can look at Barbados, we can look at, or try to do things for ourselves on our own. I remember when as a manager there was, for example, talk of acquiring Radio Caribbean, for example, because at that time the owners wanted out. And they were saying, let's make that the commercial arm of Radio St. Lucia. But that's a possibility. Let the commercial side of it run things, and you can say, well, a certain amount of money from that commercial running go to the sustenance of, the public service mandate of the station. So, but not having talked about it, as Barbara has said, in terms of consultation and stakeholders, we can only think of the possibility of closure, and I don't think one person or the ultimate view about, Radio St. Lucia lies with one person.
I know the St. Lucian identity that we touched on earlier is so very important. To be able to tune to Radio St. Lucia and recognize it is the voice of St. Lucia and St. Lucians. If you take that away, what have we got? All the other networks just Tiwe Mete, what is this?
But the other part of it is that Radio St. Lucia is part of the Commonwealth Broadcasters Association.
Hold on. We have a caller from Barbano. Thank you very much, Barbano. I know we've been they don't even give me a chance to talk too much. They're so enthusiastic. Hi, Barbano. Thank you.
Yes, hi, good evening. I thought you're not going to take calls.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I got lost in the maze.
Yeah, I can understand.
Yes, how are you?
I'm okay. What about you?
I'm fine,
Hi,
stranger.
Barbara.
I see you had a birthday recently.
Huh?
And I see you had a birthday recently, and
Yes.
all the players were drinking champagne and all that. I was
No,
not
it wasn't.
invited.
The cabinet was in session.
The cabinet was in session. Talk to
Yeah.
me.
What has happened there with Radio St. Lucia? And, by the way, one needs some clarification as to whether it's the company called St. Lucia Broadcasting that's been closed down or whether it's a radio station. Huh? There's a difference between the two. But let us assume the station is being closed down. What has happened is the ultimate failure to recognize the role of a public service broadcaster, which is what Radio St. Lucia is.
And we've touched on that to a certain extent.
And that came out when the Prime Minister said that, there are different ways of giving out government information in today's world. But Radio St. Lucia is not there to give out government information. That is not the role of the public service broadcaster.
That's the GIS.
Right? That's GIS. That's a separate thing. And therefore, I think what needs to be done is to sit down, as Jerry said, understand what is the role of a public service broadcaster, see what model can operate and cost the thing, and government has to fund it. You have to understand that if it is a public service broadcast, the state funds it. All over the world, the state funds public service channels and different ways of doing it. Whether you give a license, as you say, you tax people's television sets, ultimately the money comes from the state. And if you understand that responsibility that you have, then you don't close down a public service broadcaster, a production studio, from what I'm hearing, a recording studio. That's not what you need. Take the opportunity to put things right. And the way to put things right is to define what kind of public service broadcaster that you need, the thing, and fund it. I mean, with $450,000, if you give me $450,000 now, with the kind of library that Radio St. Lucia has, and the kind of material that it has, I could I could run a public service radio on $450,000, given today's technology.
Yeah.
Right. So cost what the ideal model will be for us, fund the thing, and we mustn't take to the extreme this thing that everything must make a profit. There are certain social responsibilities that governments have to do, social services that they have to give that do not make a profit. Public service broadcasting is not about making a profit. It cannot compete with the commercial stations. It is not supposed to compete with the commercial stations. Do you hear advertising on BBC? No, you don't. That is not its role. On that, to finish, the ultimate logic of the argument that everything must make a profit in government is that the cabinet does not bring in money into the country, therefore you should close the cabinet. You should close all parts of the public service that don't bring in money except the customs.
Exactly.
Customs is the only one bringing in money. The parliament doesn't bring in money, so close it down. The cabinet doesn't bring in money, close it down. That is the logic of the thinking now, and that thinking must be changed.
And one question I'd like to ask you, the archival material that's at Radio St. Lucia, I mean, that's priceless, you know.
I know you spoke about the music. I mean, this what is going to happen to this if you close it down? It's going to be lost. It is going to be lost. You know, so this decision has to be rethought. And as I said, people have to understand what is the role of a public service broadcaster, accept that it is one of the responsibilities of government to have a public service broadcasting station, and fund it properly. And do not, and for once and for all, let it run as a public service broadcaster. And send your government in other ways, on other platforms if you want, but the role of the public service broadcaster is not information.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. For my part, I am very concerned about the St. Lucian identity. That is very, very key. That is very, very vital to me. To be able to... Do you know, a lot of tourists come here and they will listen to the other commercial radio stations and FM stations. But do you know, 9 times out of 10, on arrival here, they want to know which is your national system, which is the station that you recommend I listen to. I want to hear the news. I want to hear information. Could you recommend this? A lot of taxi drivers say that to me, and they have no choice but to tune to Radio St. Lucia. This is the voice of St. Lucia. Very, very key, very, very vital. And I just get a sense that is somehow lost on the authorities. I get that sense. I get a sense is this lack of understanding
A lack of understanding. I
what
find
the broadcast
yeah.
environment is really all about.
It makes me
And
very
and a lack of
broadcasting.
wanting to
to
understand.
understand.
That's the next
A
thing.
dismissiveness.
Yeah.
They treat very trite. I find the way they speak to things like Radio St. Lucia is very trite, very superficial, you know, and you get a sense that one that they don't understand the history, the background, the rationale, the purpose, the benefits, and there is no interest in understanding that. So,
But I was saying with the closure of, or the impending closure of Radio St. Lucia, we will be losing any benefit that we could have gained from the Commonwealth Broadcasting Association, which is a grouping of all
That's an
public
interesting
service
point.
broadcasters,
That's an interesting point.
around the world. And of course, I mean, perhaps the government can look at, the CBA and ask, what can we do? And I'm sure the CBA will be willing to sort of assist in, in the consultation in terms of, models that may have looked at, been looked at.
Hold that thought, CBA. Hi, Damon. Thank you very much, Mon.
Hey, good evening, Dave.
Good evening to you, sir.
And good evening to your guests.
Good
evening.
evening.
Hey, Jerry, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Okay, Barbara.
hey, I'm good.
Boy, you see, the sad thing is, these two foreigners who are in charge of that, who want to dismantle Radio St. Lucia, don't know the history of Radio St. Lucia. This is so sad. A Guyanese and the Prime Minister is also a foreigner. That's all I have to say. Bye-bye.
Well, they have met the requirements to being where they are, so I think that's what.
That's putting us on the spot, and it would have been nice to have heard your thoughts. I'm sure you have some ideas, but let's not just use this channel just to throw jabs. I do understand where you're coming from, but if you do have any suggestions, we would like to hear. Realistically, what are your thoughts? You may have some ideas, some suggestions. You're quite free to share them with us. We 451-9349, 453-1730. So, what is the plan? Are we going to wait, listen? Are we going to agitate? Are we going to demonstrate? Where Radio St. Lucia is concerned, are you guys going to seek an audience with the Prime Minister or the Minister of Broadcasting? Hold that thought, Leclerc. Good evening, Leclerc. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, and how do you do?
I'm very well, thanks.
Okay, let me tell you, the closure of Radio St. Lucia, be prepared to lose a lot of history, plenty history. About St. Lucia, because Radio St. Lucia has the wealth, right, of knowledge, and I think with its closure, a lot of that history would go with it, and I think for me personally, I'm a person that listen to a lot of radio, right? I've listened to radio all over. Right, and it's really sad. It's really sad. I'm checking, or I'm looking at things like La Rose, La Marguerite, the death of Cécile, Fassois, the gentleman. Right. Usually on those days that the birthdays or an anniversary of the death, something was always played, or something was always done to remind you of them.
Yeah, some tributes.
A tribute, right? And I think with all the boom now, a lot of that would be lost. A lot of that would be lost. Listen, it's really sad, It is really, really sad that thing is Radio St. Lucia is going to be going. To me, one of the top DJs or broadcasters are from Radio St. Lucia. No doubt about it. The other stations, I'm not saying that they don't have, right? Radio St. Lucia is just a difference. It's just a difference. And to lose that difference in broadcasting, a lot would be lost. A lot. And
Well, we're already losing because if you see the state of what is considered the archives of Radio St. Lucia, I mean, it will really make you cry.
Whoa.
And you can see that Radio St. Lucia has been a repository of the institutional history of a nation.
That's where the history is. That's where the history is all.
And so even that. When you look, for example, at some of the other broadcasters, they have turned that archival material into I would say a money-generating avenue, for the sustenance of of their stations. And so this is something. For example, I don't think people think of the BBC only in terms of perhaps what they hear and what they see, but it's a humongous organization. It has about 7 radio stations catering to or networks. I wouldn't say radio station networks. Catering to the various tastes.
Yeah, and this is what I was advocating earlier that RSL could have had, a few years ago.
Yes.
Paula, I'd like to ask you a question very quickly.
Yeah.
What are you hearing on the ground? Are people discussing the possible closure of Radio St. Lucia? What are people saying? What are you hearing?
Okay, what I am hearing is possible closure of it. All right, and a lot of people are speaking about when it's gone, what will replace that, and they're not really speaking about, okay, they know it's going to be closed, or everybody is saying that it's going to be closed, and the thing is, what will be replacing Radio St. Lucia? What will be replacing Radio St. Lucia?
So there is concern.
Yeah, there a lot of concern.
And you think with Radio St. Lucia gone, it's going to leave a vacuum, definitely.
Listen, for people that do not know, the boom boom of it, people will not even think twice. Okay, Radio St. Lucia can go, all right? But you see, if you want to listen to good programming, go to Radio St. Lucia. And I know what I'm talking about. I've listened to a lot of radio stations all over, all right? And in St. Lucia, to me, how many there are 20?
20, about 20.
20.
23.
23. Take out the 20, yeah? Take out the 20. I'm sorry. Take out the 20. Just have the 3. And listen, that ain't no boasting, I know what I'm talking about, I want to ask a question. The announcers from Radio St. Lucia, where will they go to?
Well, the minister, Honorable Dominic Fede, said that he would be making an announcement as to what's going on, and I think with the staff, what's supposed to happen to the staff. Obviously, if the closure does take place, they'll be paid off and sent home. I know that the union met with the staff at the station. Was it day before? So.
Paula, thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I'm not too sure what was said there, but they had met their representatives to sort of get a sense of what next.
We have another caller. Hi, thank you very much for your patience. Appreciate it.
Hello, good night.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Yes, I'm just calling to say if they close Radio St. Lucia, we'll miss out a lot because we get a lot of information, okay, and the rest doesn't really do that. Okay, and if Radio St. Lucia, they inform us and they give us a lot of information about the children, Christmas time, and all these things. And the rest doesn't do that. The rest is a music, bombarding your mind with music, and no kind of information. You see? And as long as you speak the truth, they won't like you. Okay? They will always put you aside. And from the time they put Sheldon out, the radio station have dropped. Okay? And to revive it, I don't think so. As long as that government is there.
Well, that is not entirely surprising.
So, because the thing is that as long as you speak the truth, nobody like it.
Well, caller, if you have some ideas about Radio St. Lucia to make it a better broadcast entity, you have some suggestions, I would appreciate hearing it from you. But it's not about,
let me share something
let's not
with you.
politicize.
Let me share something with you. When Jerry was there, they fight him so much and say he could not manage. He could not manage the station. Jerry has a lot of programs, okay? And they fight him down.
But Jerry, we're talking about 1997 to 2000, so that's a
true.
long time ago.
It's true.
Yeah.
As long as you a person that bring forth the word and you bring forth the truth, they would sack you in a corner. Okay? All right.
Let's keep it to Radio Solution, man. Thank you
very
much.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you. We appreciate your input. That is what radio is all about. That is what TV is all about. You're going to get the cross-fertilization of views and opinions. And
that's what a radio station, national radio station, does. Diversity of views. You know, there is room on national radio for both SLP as well as for UWP.
Moshi, good evening, Moshi. Thank you so much for calling.
Yes, hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Yeah, I just have a couple of points.
Go right ahead.
Possibly one suggestion.
Please speak into a little louder. I'm not hearing it too well.
Yes, okay. I said I have...
Wonderful. Okay.
Possibly one suggestion.
Sure.
I would like to know the quantum of monies owed to RSL in receivables. Both by the government and possibly other persons. And see if that could settle the $3 million debt. To me, the government's decision to close in Radio St. Lucia speaks to not just shutting down Radio St. Lucia, but shutting down castries. That's soon to be. Shutting down castries. Laziness in seeking alternatives, in being innovative. I find it a dismissive attitude to consultation and to the richness of the discussions that you can get out of our people. It's almost a disrespect to our people to think that we're lacking so much in ideas, that we can't solve a problem, that either it works or we shut it down. I think this government should then shut down all the government offices in Castries because it's not making money. Are the government offices making money? Right? So before he makes the move, I would like the government of St. Lucia to share with us what process that came to the decision that shutting down is the only one.
That's a very fair comment. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It's a very fair comment.
Tell him, share with us what has been done, what has been explored, what results they got from the discussion.
Okay.
Not the only thing that was left was to shut down Radio St. Lucia.
Okay, caller.
Thank you.
Thank you. Castries, good evening. Castries, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good
Hi.
evening.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate your patience. Go right ahead.
All right, I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First, we say there are 23 radio stations in St. Lucia.
Yes.
What's the financial position of the other radio stations?
Most of them very bad. That's all I can say. Most of them very bad.
All right. I mean, people are speaking here and there, but I need for somebody to help me to crystallize the advantages that Radio St. Lucia has over these other stations, because somehow or the other I have the impression, and there's nothing to base that on, it's just an impression, that the other radio stations may have market share, if we can measure that in any way, that makes them appear more attractive and more successful than Radio St. Lucia. And that may be fueling the government perception that this is a failed institution.
Let me give you some information about market share. I'm not going to mention the name of the radio station. I guess it's generally well known. But that one radio station has about 60% market share. 60% of the population.
Is that continuous or is that segmented?
No, that is continuous. They seem to have cornered the market. That one radio station has virtually cornered the market. and the rest, the 40% left, is shared, you might say, almost equally by the remaining stations.
Right. So
5%
if you have that
here,
information,
4% here, 6% here, and so on.
if you have that information, I'm suspecting that the powers that be at Radio St. Lucia may also have that kind of information, but I don't get the impression that they're doing anything to copy, to compete, and to do anything to gain market share. And that's just my impression. I mean, and that may be what's fueling the perception from the government. That
well, you see, you have to be very careful when you talk about market share. And
Right.
as we were saying earlier, should Radio St. Lucia, a national broadcaster, a public service broadcaster, be looked upon in the very same way as the other commercial broadcast systems in the country? And that is the discussion we should be having.
Right. So let's start by asking the question: is Radio St. Lucia national public service broadcaster?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, it's intended to be.
It's intended to be.
By and large,
it operates largely as a commercial entity. It's funded purely. I mean, it gets a subvention,
well,
but
maybe
its programming and everything else is attempting to compete with the other stations.
And maybe that's the problem.
It does not have a choice.
I mean, it's not creating any content that can be sold.
But that is not true.
Well,
that is not true at all.
Currently, is it creating content right now?
Of course, it creates content, but at the same time, I think the existing archive of Radio St. Lucia.
No, I agree. There's a rich archive at Radio St. Lucia.
Yes.
Valuable. And you would be surprised that some of it has been destroyed and dumped.
No, I would not be surprised.
That's true.
I know that because
I would not be surprised.
Enough.
I would not be surprised. But I think to suggest that Radio St. Lucia has to, that what we need for it to do is for it to be generating new content without acknowledging the fact that it has a rich archive that can be monetized and that can sustain its programming.
But the absence, the critical absence is two things really. One, a vision and a plan at the national level of the role of Radio St. Lucia. I don't think that has been entertained at any time.
And that's what we're saying.
That's not true.
That's what we're saying.
That has been.
Yeah, there have been successive studies, done.
There have been quite a few studies done
on the radio station.
But there is further implementation of anything.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you're right there. Most definitely.
Because I mean, caller, hear us. We are not putting squarely at the door of this present administration. The problem that Radio St. Lucia. Yeah, that is.
I am with you. I am not against Radio St. Lucia. I would love to see Radio St. Lucia continue. I'm playing devil's advocate because it needs to be something questioned.
Well, I think we had said from the start that it's like apple and oranges. You say the station is, and that's where the voice of, what do we say, the national station of St. Lucia, because the government.
That's a slogan. It doesn't have anything else to follow it.
The government saw it as that type of agency, only to be told, just not even mid, at the start of the station's life, that it now has to perform the other role of a commercial broadcaster.
Yes,
so you see a mixed bag of what its role is, has sort of, put it in a tailspin.
In other words, it has to be all things to everybody, and that's difficult.
Including a government's fleecing it.
But can you put the genie back in the bottle? I mean, we today, with the changes in the media platforms that are available to everybody else, I'm not sure Radio St. Lucia has.
So you think? So listen. So you think Radio St. Lucia has become obsolete in your mind?
I think the model is obsolete.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Wow, interesting.
Which model is that? Is that the public broadcasting model?
Well, I guess what he's saying, what he's listening to, what it has become, to him, it's obsolete.
Oh, I disagree.
Yeah.
I disagree.
Yeah. Wow, it's been very interesting. Any closing thoughts? Do you think that maybe we need to have a conversation? You guys, let's meet the Prime Minister and let's have a conversation with him as to the future of Radio St. Lucia.
Well,
Why don't we invite the Prime Minister, try to see him and have a conversation
Dave,
with
let's
him?
have a national conversation.
Yes.
Let's have a
Yes.
national
Yes,
conversation.
I think that conversation.
It's.
I think it's very important that we do. Let's go to Barbano. Hi, Barbano. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry to call you again, but just two quick questions. How reliable is the source of the 60% market share for one radio station? I've heard that the person who has been paying for the survey is the one that normally comes up on top in that survey. So if you could, the other thing is that I don't know whether Jerry has an idea of what in fact are the operating costs of the distribution now on an annual basis. Let's forget what is ordered, the 3 million or whatever. How much is it costing it now to run the station?
Wow.
Less than 450,000, more than 450,000?
Well, I know
you have any idea?
the station lost over $500,000 in the last year.
Uh-huh.
From what?
Well,
Uncollected revenue?
just they lost money. They were
in other
spending
words,
more money.
they were spending more money than they were bringing in.
making. Right.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
But you have no idea of how much it is that it's costing to operate it right now?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But remember, it's a highly deficient radio station today. It's not a radio station we used to know, where it had its towers and view for. There always all sorts of technical problems.
Yeah,
And that has been part of the problem, that Radio St. Lucia has not functioned normally as it did, say, 4 or 5 years ago.
It's been in crisis mode. It's been in crisis mode for a very long time.
Yes, it has been. Right. I think one of the storms, I'm not sure which one now, knocked down one of its masts at the Mon.
Yeah.
And as well as in View Fort.
Well, this comes back to the point that all you all have made it early on. Look, decide what it is, what kind of public broadcast it is supposed to be, cost it, and fund it. If you accept that is what it is supposed to be. If you don't accept that's what it is supposed to be, then you will close it down. But it should not be closed down because we all agree that there is a need for public service broadcaster in the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, because what you get is the public service broadcaster being treated as a radio station is a radio station is a radio station. That's how, there's no, how do I say, defining, features different from any commercial station. And if you're to judge us by this way, obviously it's you will always say, well, if that's how you want to do it, then it has to be closed. But if not, and there is a role, for Radio St. Lucia, then, we have to look at it again.
So we want to advocate that the government considers a national conversation with broadcasters in St. Lucia.
The public.
And the public.
The public. I mean,
have an open forum.
Have
an open forum and let's talk. Let's talk about how the future of Radio St. Lucia, and let's listen to the public, and suggestions can be made as to how to keep it on the air. Marsha, good evening, Marsha. Hi, Marsha.
Yes, hello.
Hi, what's up?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good night, Dave. Good night, Barbara. Good night, Jerry.
Yeah.
I just want to answer the caller before on a simple point when he said that Radio St. Lucia is obsolete.
Yeah.
In the past couple of years, Radio St. Lucia has been placed in all the survey in the top 5 of broadcasting in St. Lucia. So that shows you it is very relevant, and its program, most of the important time in its program are very well rated tops in terms of information and educated programs. So I just wanted to make that point when you say it's obsolete, simply.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's one thing I just wanted to stick in there. The whole concept of the obsolete, it's bothering me when the caller said it, but I do understand where he may be coming from. Because Radio St. Lucia has been under-resourced for so long, in crisis mode for so long, there's a lot of sort of modernization that has not taken place. A lot of sort of retooling in terms of, what the communication technology now is doing, and how, we're really using the online media, that kind of way, to really multiply our reach and build. And so there's that work that needs to be done, and nobody's going to deny that.
Closing thoughts, Jerry?
Well, I think it's a resource that we can't afford to lose. There are models that have been already. In fact, Radio St. Lucia has been studied, over several decades. There have been reports upon reports upon reports.
True.
And the Prime Minister has just received another report.
Yes,
So the only thing that's missing in all this is that if we are going to take a dramatic step as closing the radio station, at least let's have a national dialogue on it. I think at least that is the beginning of planning a way forward, rather than just the drastic and dramatic move of just saying, make money, close down.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I concur 100% with Jerry. I also want to say that the current situation that Radio St. Lucia is in is not unique to Radio St. Lucia. You'll find that a lot of the small islands in the Caribbean may be grappling with the same type of problem. And we have enough mechanisms that we participate in at a regional level that we can even look beyond St. Lucia and have that conversation, have that dialogue, because more and more, as we look at ourselves as small island states, how are we going to continue? How are we finding ways to sort of define who we are in this big global space? And can we afford to lose our public broadcasters? What can be learned from the Radio St. Lucia situation? And how can there be a cross-fertilization of ideas, not only from the citizens of the country, but maybe from some of the visionaries, some of the thinkers, some of the people who are in technology, some of the people who are in business, so how can we come together and sort of look at that as, yeah.
I like the idea of having a national conversation. And my hope is that very, very soon, at the earliest opportunity, that we can get yourself, Jerry, and Barbara, and others who are concerned to possibly have a meeting with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Broadcasting initially to pave the way for a national conversation. I think we need to look at that very, very seriously. And the vacuum that not having a Radio St. Lucia is going to create in the country. And it is so interesting. We were talking initially about information and news, edification and stuff like that. But one of the things that I did not really pay very much attention to is the music, the arts, our Cessens, our Lawas and La Marguerites, and all of that rich material that is lying there in the archives. The folkways, very, very, what is going to happen to, because the other radio stations in the country aren't concerned about that, or these. Wadawash, you are the final caller. Thanks very much. Wadawash.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, good day. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of those wonderful things about public broadcast services is that the P is for the public. And if the format is considered worthy, it will be funded via donations of concerned citizens. You see? And a non-commercial, we ought not be the mouthpiece of any government. That's what I say. Just do like what you've been doing consistently over the years, and do what is relevant and necessary.
Yeah.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further word? Are we okay?
That's it.
Wonderful. Well, that's it. It's been a very engaging discourse. And TBC to be continued. And I want to thank you very, very much, Jerry George, the General Manager of Radio St. Lucia, 97 to 2000, and Ms. Barbara Jacobs Small, a one-time programs director at Radio St. Lucia, the national station. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed and hope that many of you out there will take to the airways and air your views, and I'm quite sure that we can have quite a conversation, a national conversation about the future as far as Radio St. Lucia is concerned. This program is going to be rebroadcast on Sunday at the same time, 8:30 until 10, and on Wednesday morning right after the 6 a.m. news. This is David Samuel speaking on behalf of Jerry George and Barbara Jacob Small and Randall upstairs, the big man upstairs. This meeting is adjourned.